Welcome to NTD Evening News. Our top story tonight, President Trump hosting the Saudi Crown Prince for a day of pomp and circumstance at the White House. And the Crown Prince upping his planned U.S. investments to $1 trillion. Mario Tsu standing by at the White House with the latest. Lawmakers voted overwhelmingly to compel the Justice Department to release the Epstein files. Republican leadership warning of potential misinformation, while the DOJ continues its investigations into prominent Democrats linked to the disgraced financier. Luis Martinez on Capitol Hill. A three-judge panel today blocked a congressional map redrawn by the Republican-led Texas legislature. The new map could have given Republicans 5 additional seats in the U.S. House. Arlene Richards has the latest. The Education Department says it's moving some of its functions to other federal agencies, at least for now. It's a major step toward the Trump administration's goal of eventually dismantling the department. What the Education Secretary is saying about the move. The mayor of another North Carolina city says ICE is on its way. This comes 3 days after an operation started in Charlotte over the weekend. Jason Blair reports.
This is NTD Evening News, live from our global headquarters in New York City. Here's Tiffany Meyer.
Good evening and thank you for joining us tonight. President Trump welcoming the Saudi Crown Prince at the White House for a day of pomp and circumstance. The Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman pledging to boost his country's investment in the U.S. from $600 billion to $1 trillion. We now go live to NTD's Washington correspondent Mario Tsu at the White House. Good evening, Mari. What is the latest from the Crown Prince's visit?
Tiff, good evening. Yes, President Trump today is welcoming the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman, also known for short as MBS, to the White House for talks on AI investments, civil nuclear investments, and defense agreements amid a day of pomp, circumstance, and ceremony. And MBS praises President Trump's peace efforts off the bat and also announces that he's upping his $600 billion pledge of investments in the U.S. to $1 trillion. Take a look.
You're saying to me now that the $600 billion will be $1 trillion.
Definitely, because what we are signing, it will facilitate that.
I like that very much.
President Trump greeting the Saudi Crown Prince on the South Lawn with an honor guard, military band, and flyover, and touting his administration's economic agenda and tariff strategy.
You know, when you invest $1 trillion, that's national security for us, too. Because it creates jobs, it creates a lot of things.
Mr. President, it's the most hottest country in the planet, but what you're creating is not about opportunity today, it's about also long-term opportunity in us in America, and we want to be part of it.
The president calling the Crown Prince a very good friend.
Hey, Mr. President.
And praising the changes MBS has brought to Saudi Arabia. Women can now drive and work, and religious police have been stripped of most power.
I'm very proud of the job he's done. What he's done is incredible in terms of human rights and everything else.
But this is also MBS's first visit to Washington since the 2018 murder of journalist Jamal Khashoggi inside the Saudi consulate in Istanbul. U.S. intelligence believed the Crown Prince approved the operation, while MBS has denied ordering it, but has acknowledged it happened on his watch.
About the journalists, it's really painful to hear. It's a huge mistake, and we are doing our best that this doesn't happen again.
President Trump quickly stepped in to defend his guest when a reporter pressed the Crown Prince on Khashoggi.
You're mentioning somebody that was extremely controversial. Whether you like him or didn't like him, things happen. But he knew nothing about it, and we can leave it at that. You don't have to embarrass our guest by asking a question like that.
And the president didn't stop there, calling the question horrible and insubordinate and suggesting the FCC should pull ABC's broadcast license over what he called fake and biased coverage.
I think the license should be taken away from ABC because your news is so fake. And it's so wrong.
Meanwhile, as the House passes the bill to release the Epstein files, President Trump denies association with the financier, claiming Epstein donated to Democrats and pointing to others with ties to him.
I have nothing to do with Jeffrey Epstein. I threw him out of my club many years ago because I thought he was a sick pervert. But you know who does have? Bill Clinton, Larry Summers, who ran Harvard. They lived together. They went to his island many times. I never did.
Meanwhile, MBS told President Trump today that he is open to working on getting Saudi Arabia to join the Abraham Accords and normalize its relations with Israel, but only if the agreement provides a path forward for a Palestinian state. And President Trump, meanwhile, confirms that the Saudis will get the same model of advanced F-35 fighter jets as Israel has, as both are what he calls close allies to the U.S. Tiff, back to you.
All right, Mari, thanks for those updates. As President Trump prepares to host dinner with the Saudi Arabian Crown Prince, how will the $1 trillion investment pledge impact Americans? Tonight on Capitol Report with Steve Lance, hear from Matt Clint and Atiba Madian. The House of Representatives passed a resolution to release the files that the Department of Justice has on Jeffrey Epstein. Once the bill is sent to the Senate, it is expected to pass by unanimous consent. Our Washington correspondent Luis Martinez has more on the story.
427 lawmakers voted in favor, and only Republican Congressman Clay Higgins voted against the bill to compel the Department of Justice to release the Epstein files.
Don't muck it up in the Senate. Don't get too cute. We're all paying attention. If you want to add some additional protections for these survivors, go for it. But if you do anything that prevents any disclosure, you are not for the people and you are not part of this effort.
The president has also said that he would sign the bill into law if it reached his desk.
Democrats are trying to use the Epstein matter as a political weapon to distract from their own party's failures. And in a desperate attempt, they're trying to somehow tie President Trump to the scandal.
Speaker of the House Mike Johnson, who opposes the bill, has warned the public of potential flaws in the legislation and potential impacts if it's signed into law.
The discharge petition could create new victims, okay? Because it requires the DOJ to release information even in cases where the DOJ or the FBI has already reviewed it and determined it is not credible. It is false information.
Republicans have made it clear that their investigation through the House Oversight Committee on the Jeffrey Epstein case will not end if the Jeffrey Epstein files that the Department of Justice has are released.
And they deserve justice. It has been too long delayed. Not just justice for what they were made to endure, but also we need answers on why it took so long for the Department of Justice itself to do that job under previous leadership.
The Department of Justice is pursuing investigations on links in between prominent Democrats and Jeffrey Epstein. Earlier today, former Democratic Treasury Secretary Larry Summers stepped down from public life after emails linked him to Jeffrey Epstein. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Luis Eduardo Martinez, NTD News.
A 3-judge panel today said a new congressional map drawn by the Texas legislature cannot be used for the 2026 election. NTD's Arlene Richards has more.
A 3-judge federal panel ruled on Tuesday that the state of Texas will have to use its old 2021 congressional map for the 2026 election, instead of the new map that was passed in August. The new map had easily cleared the GOP-controlled legislature and was then signed into law by Governor Greg Abbott. It could have given Republicans an additional 5 seats in the U.S. House. If the new map could be used for the 2026 election, Republicans would have a chance for 30 of the state's 38 seats, up from the 25 they currently hold, which would help protect the GOP majority in the U.S. House. Judge Jeffrey Brown, who sat on the panel, said there was a public perception that the redrawing was about politics. In addition, he said there was significant evidence of racial gerrymandering in the new map. The decision comes 10 days into the month-long period when candidates can sign up for the March primary. The filing deadline is December 8th. Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton is wasting no time preparing an appeal to the Supreme Court. In a press release on Tuesday, Paxton said he would be submitting a filing to the highest court and asking them to pause the panel's decision. He said the map was entirely legal and that it represented the political affiliations of Texas. Paxton further said that Democratic states across the country had systematically reduced representation for Republican voters in their congressional delegation. It's not immediately clear if the state will be granted the right to restore the new map in time for 2026. Arlene Richards, NTD News.
The Education Department says it's moving some of its functions to other federal agencies, at least for now. It's a major step toward the Trump administration's goal of eventually dismantling the department. Here's Education Secretary Linda McMahon on Fox talking about this.
What we are doing to take certain programs that are now part of the Department of Education and what we call signing interagency agreements, and that is that we procure the services of other agencies. It's kind of a bit of a test run. We want to move on a temporary basis some of those programs to different agencies.
Affected functions include federal grant programs for K through 12 schools and higher education, accreditation for foreign medical schools, and international education programs, among other things. They'll now be handled together by the Departments of Health and Human Services, Labor, Interior, and State. But McMahon says the funding will still come from the Education Department. McMahon says the goal is to break up the federal bureaucracy and return education to the states. The mayor of Raleigh, North Carolina, says ICE operations could start in the city as soon as today. That's while an operation 170 miles away in Charlotte results in at least 130 arrests since starting on Saturday. NTD correspondent Jason Blair has the updates.
Mayor Janet Cowell of Raleigh, North Carolina, says ICE enforcement is coming to the city. Cowell states that she's not sure about the size or length of the operation. She says crime in the city has dropped from the previous year. Cowell says, I ask Raleigh to remember our values and maintain peace and respect through any upcoming challenges. There have been reports that ICE agents were seen operating in Raleigh on Tuesday and will also be in New Orleans by the end of the week. The federal government has not commented or made any official announcements. Chief Patrol Agent Gregory Bovino did say this to News Nation.
Wherever we go, rest assured, beyond a shadow of a doubt, as sure as the sun rises, we're going to take as many bad people and bad things off the street as we can.
And Operation Charlotte's Web continues in Charlotte, North Carolina after starting over the weekend. An estimated 200 arrests have been made so far. North Carolina Rep. Alma Adams made public statements to Charlotte residents in response to the operation, claiming that ICE is targeting American citizens.
Charlotte, our community is under siege. ICE and Border Patrol are roaming this community, profiling people, picking people up. It does not matter who you are.
The DHS has responded to similar claims that U.S. citizens are being targeted, calling them false. The DHS has said that U.S. citizens are never targeted and may be detained only if someone assaults or interferes with an ICE operation or during dangerous operations when it's normal protocol to briefly detain everyone in an area while law enforcement are targeting specific suspects like gang members. White House Board Czar Tom Homan responded to Rep. Adams' comments.
What other federal agency does she think should not enforce laws? We're taking public safety threats out of her community every day, which makes her community safer.
Federal agents in Charlotte have also faced protests and people allegedly trying to disrupt their operations. DHS says one man drove a van towards officers on Sunday, injuring one agent. And in San Antonio, Texas, law enforcement says over 140 illegal immigrants were arrested during a sex and human trafficking raid. Authorities say the illegal operation was being run by members of the Tren de Aragua gang. Jason Blair, NTD News.
The U.S. continues working with allies Canada and Finland to maintain their presence in the Arctic. The three nations recently agreed to build more icebreakers, which are ships designed to break through and navigate through ice-covered waters. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem met with representatives from the two nations today.
The Arctic is the world's last, most wild frontier, and our adversaries are racing to claim its strategic position and its rich natural resources for their own. If we give up that high ground, then we will condemn future generations to permanent insecurity, and we're not going to let that happen on our watch.
Last week, the U.S., Canada, and Finland agreed to establish the Icebreaker collaboration effort. They aim to work together to share knowledge and strengthen their ability to produce high-level icebreakers. And today, the three nations signed a joint statement of intent. It will strengthen industrial cooperation while supporting domestic shipbuilding industries and creating more jobs. The representatives say expanding icebreaker fleets will help better address Arctic challenges. Coming up, Spain announces a major aid package for Ukraine worth almost $1 billion. Ariane Pozdar has what the package includes and how it involves the United States. The Hamas terrorist group rejects the United Nations resolution on Gaza. Meanwhile, conflict continues in the West Bank as terrorists kill one Israeli and injure three others. Jason Perry reports. Christian communities in Nigeria are under attack, with thousands killed and kidnapped this year. Global leaders and rap artist Nicki Minaj are taking the issue to the UN, calling for urgent action. Christina Corona brings us the latest. And a new congressional report details how the Chinese regime is using control over industries like pharmaceuticals and technology as a form of warfare against the U.S. Jack Bradley has more on that after the break. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Spain announces a major aid package for Ukraine worth almost $1 billion. It includes the purchase of U.S. weapons to defend Ukraine as the fighting continues. And Ukrainian officials say Moscow bombed the newsroom of a national broadcaster today. NTD's international correspondent Arian Pazdar has the war update.
Good morning, Mr. Zelensky.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is in Spain on Tuesday. Spain is rolling out a substantial aid package for Ukraine, worth almost $1 billion.
Spain is mobilizing 817 million euros. Firstly, to support the Ukrainian army in its defense of Ukraine. Secondly, to protect its civilian population.
The $950 million aid package also allocates over $100 million to the purchase of U.S. weapons for Ukraine. This comes amid a surge of Russian drone and missile attacks on Ukraine in recent weeks. Just on Tuesday, Ukrainian officials reported that Russian drones sparked multiple fires in Dnipro after hitting several areas of the city. Among the damaged buildings is the newsroom of a Ukrainian public broadcaster called Suspilny. The broadcaster says a fire broke out, windows and doors are blown out, and the building's floors and roof are damaged.
The most important thing is that no one was in the office during the attack. Sometimes people stay late to finish work, but yesterday, fortunately, wasn't one of those days.
And in Poland, an explosion damaged a Polish railway track on a route to Ukraine on Monday. Poland's prime minister now says they identified 2 people responsible for the explosion, adding that Poland knows who they work for.
The individuals identified are 2 Ukrainian citizens who have for a long time been operating and collaborating with Russian services.
He added that the 2 suspects had crossed from Belarus shortly before the attacks and had fled back across the border before the authorities could identify them. A Kremlin spokesman responded to the claim that Russia is behind the attack.
Russia is accused of all manifestations of the ongoing hybrid and direct war. Russophobia is, of course, flourishing there.
He pointed to the fact that the suspects are not Russian but Ukrainian citizens, which is also the case with the suspects in the Nord Stream pipeline explosions. Poland is now planning to introduce a higher threat level on certain railway lines and use military to protect key infrastructure. Arian Pazdar, NTD News.
The Hamas terrorist group now says it rejects a UN Security Council resolution that endorses the Gaza peace plan brokered by President Trump. According to the resolution, international forces will now be responsible for disarming Hamas. NTD's Jason Perry has the details.
Residents in the Gaza Strip could soon see significant changes in the territory now that the Gaza peace plan, brokered by President Trump, was adopted by the United Nations Security Council. The resolution offers a pathway to Palestinian statehood. It also allows international troops to deploy to the Gaza Strip as part of an international stabilization force. And the international forces will be tasked with disarming the Hamas terrorist group, something Hamas has not yet agreed to. A resident in the southern Gaza Strip on Tuesday shared his thoughts on the newly adopted resolution.
The positive things are that we can rest from the war, strikes, aggression, and the difficult situation that we are living in. The negative points that we are facing as Palestinians are that international forces have a bad reputation in the countries where they are deployed.
A spokesperson for the Hamas terrorist group said they reject the resolution, saying it ignores the interest of the Palestinian people. And he added that international troops will now replace the Israeli force occupying Gaza. On the other hand, Israel's President Isaac Herzog commended the resolution and congratulated President Trump after the United Nations adopted his Gaza peace plan. A resident in Israel shared her thoughts on the prospect of a Palestinian state.
I think that this is a shame to create a state, to give responsibility to people that use the money of the world and the money of Israel just to support and create terrorism.
On the same day, emergency crews responded to the scene of a terrorist attack in the West Bank. In the attack, 2 Palestinian terrorists drove a car into people and then started stabbing Israelis, killing 1 man and injuring 3. The Israeli military said Israeli troops opened fire on the terrorists, killing both of them. And recently released video from Monday shows Israeli settlers attacking this Palestinian residence in the West Bank. The group throws rocks at this vehicle while the driver is still inside, and then they light the other vehicles on fire. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu condemned the settlers' attacks, and he said he would ensure that the Israelis behind the latest attacks against Palestinians in the West Bank are brought to justice. Jason Perry, NTD News.
Nigeria is facing a rising wave of attacks on its Christian population, with killings and kidnappings reported across the country. U.S. officials and musical artist Nicki Minaj took the issue to the United Nations, calling for urgent action to protect Nigeria's Christian communities. NTD's Christina Corona tells us more.
Nicki Minaj is joining the Trump administration's push to address rising attacks on Christians in Nigeria. U.S. Ambassador to the UN, Mike Waltz, invited her to speak at the United Nations, praising her for using her platform to highlight what he calls severe religious persecution.
In Nigeria, Christians are being targeted, driven from their homes, and killed. Churches have been burned. Families have been torn apart, and entire communities live in fear constantly, simply because of how they pray.
Advocacy groups report more than 7,000 Christians have been killed from January to August of this year. The nonprofit Open Door says 80% of all violence against Christians worldwide is now happening in Nigeria.
Pastors have been beheaded for preaching the Sermon on the Mount. Entire villages wake up to gunfire because they dare to commit the crime of calling Jesus their Lord.
Speaker Sean Nelson explained why he believes Christians are being targeted.
Anybody who stands in the face of a totalizing and violent extremist view shouldn't be allowed to exist. They should be stamped out and wiped out. And of course, that means that you can also take their land. It means you can take their wives and their girls.
Nigeria is the most populated country in Africa in 2025, with around 237.5 million people, and almost half are just under 18. President Bola Ahmed Tinubu leads a Muslim-majority nation of about 53%, while Christians make up roughly 44%. Minaj repeatedly emphasized this is not about choosing a side.
Religious freedom means we all can sing our faith regardless of who we are, where we live, and what we believe. Protecting Christians in Nigeria is not about taking sides. I will care if anyone, anywhere, is being persecuted for their beliefs.
This comes after President Trump said he's labeling Nigeria a country of particular concern under the International Religious Freedom Act, saying Christians there are facing a serious threat.
They're killing record numbers of Christians in Nigeria. They're killing the Christians and killing them in very large numbers. We're not going to allow that to happen.
Earlier this month, Trump threatened to cut all U.S. aid to Nigeria if its government fails to stop the killing of Christians. Christina Corona, NTD News.
Our access to life-saving medicine and simple technology may be at risk unless the U.S. government acts fast. The congressionally appointed U.S.-China Commission released its annual report detailing how the CCP could weaponize its supply chain controls on pharmaceuticals and technology. NTD's Washington correspondent Jack Bradley has the details.
Chinese producers wield significant control over active pharmaceutical ingredients and key equipment used in the U.S. electrical grid. U.S. reliance on China creates a dangerous dependence that China can weaponize if it wants to.
The U.S.-China Economic and Security Review Commission says the Chinese Communist Party is aiming to weaponize U.S. reliance on Chinese medicine and electronics, with the threat of halting exports to have the upper hand in any bargaining negotiation. Now, they also examined other areas that could harm the U.S. and global economic stability, like the invasion of Taiwan, for instance.
Chinese incursions into Taiwan's air defense identification zone have increased 15,000% over 5 years, from only 20 in 2019 to over 3,000 in 2024. And they're on pace for even more incursions in 2025.
Beijing used its monopoly over critical mineral refining to impose export controls on rare earth elements. We can be sure China will be ready to weaponize these choke points again when politically advantageous.
A couple months ago, the CCP put export restrictions on rare earth elements, and that move triggered a trade war between the U.S. and China that later calmed down by a recent trade deal involving lower tariffs and removing those export restrictions. China has a monopoly on processing these rare earth elements, and without them, it could harm the U.S. and world economies and their national security, as rare earths are used in things from iPhones to missiles. The commission also says the U.S. needs more data on just how reliant we are on Chinese products. That's as some products that don't overtly say they're made in China may have parts that are made in China, making the U.S. just unknown to how vulnerable it may be to certain supply chains controlled by China.
A lot of the time when we talk about getting drugs or medications, other things from India, for instance, a lot of the original inputs to that medication, to those pharmaceuticals came from China originally.
The commission recommends responding to China's non-market practices by uniting with other countries to place import barriers on subsidized Chinese products. And the commission also raised the necessity for the U.S. to de-risk from the Chinese-dominated industries and instead rely on itself and its partners. Reporting by Jack Bradley, NTD News.
Coming up, what does President Trump's meeting with the Saudi Crown Prince mean for U.S.-Saudi cooperation and the Middle East region more broadly? And how significant is the approved sale to Saudi Arabia of F-35 stealth jets? And Middle East affairs analyst and national security analyst join us to discuss when we come back. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman said during his meeting with President Trump today that he will boost the investment partnership with the U.S. from $600 billion to $1 trillion. The visit comes a day after Trump said he intends to approve the sale of advanced F-35 fighter jets to Saudi Arabia, a move that would significantly expand the kingdom's military capabilities. Joining us now to discuss these latest developments are two guests, Middle East affairs analyst Gerard Filitti. He's also an attorney specializing in international law, and national security analyst Rebecca Grant. She's the vice president of the Lexington Institute. Thank you both so much for being here. Gerard, starting with you, the meeting seemed quite warm. What does this mean in terms of the Middle East dynamic?
This means that what we are seeing is a substantive geopolitical realignment underway, where the United States-Saudi partnership is being re-cemented after more than a decade of faltering, and where the U.S. sees the Saudis as a strategic partner of maintaining security and stability in the Middle East, and also at the same time as a reliable partner that will reject more advances from Russia and China. So this is really a key strategic move here, which also broadens the prospect for Saudi involvement in the Abraham Accords and partnering with Israel down the line as well.
I want to get to China, but Rebecca, a big point of the meeting today was the approved sale of F-35 stealth jets to Saudi Arabia. That makes the Saudis just the second country in the Middle East behind Israel to have F-35s. How significant is this for the region?
It's significant, and it's a good sign. Saudi Arabia has a first-rate military, a really good Air Force. They already operate U.S.-made F-15s and many other planes. So for them to acquire the F-35 gives them additional capabilities in the future against missiles, cruise missiles, and it really gives them that next chapter in air power that they need. They'll also be buying 300 US-made tanks, probably the M1 Abrams made out in Ohio. And this keeps Saudi as an important military ally and just brings them up to pace with our other top allies around the world.
And Gerard, on the F-35 front, as you mentioned earlier, there are concerns on national security grounds about Saudi Arabia's technological and defense ties with China and the risk that China could now access this latest tech. Do you see that as a concern? And if so, how should the U.S. guard against that?
That absolutely is a concern, but I think that these are concerns that have been addressed behind the scenes between Washington and Riyadh. The F-35 is the advanced state-of-the-art fighter. It's a stealth fighter that is really a game changer for the United States, and we don't trust that with countries that are not our closest allies. So in order to give the Saudis that technology, and even transferring technology with AI and data centers and other things that were discussed in Washington, that suggests that there have been detailed discussions on not doing business with China and having assurances that this technology will not get into China's hands.
And Rebecca, your thoughts on this?
Oh, they're not going to risk the F-35 capability by doing anything with China. Remember, these F-35s, it's going to be a couple years at least till they're delivered. Their pilots have to be trained. And in the F-35, it's all about software. That's very easy to tailor for overseas purchases. It was designed that way. That stuff will stay out of Chinese hands for sure.
And Gerard, Saudi Arabia was on the road to normalizing relations with Israel before October 7th. And in today's meeting, the Crown Prince indicated Saudi Arabia wants to be part of the Abraham Accords, but also wants a clear path to a two-state solution in Gaza. How are you reading this? Are we closer to seeing Saudi Arabia joining the Abraham Accords?
We are closer in large part thanks to the Security Council's resolution yesterday, which does put forward a tangible step forward for security in Gaza and building that framework for a potential Palestinian state. That's essential language and an essential guarantee under international law that gives the Saudis the cover that they need to move forward with normalizing ties with Israel, although we're not likely to see full membership in the Abraham Accords for some time.
And staying with you, Gerard, very quickly, what would that mean for the region?
What that would mean basically is a unified front against Iran and Iranian proxies. It would mean more defense cooperation, definitely economic cooperation that would benefit all the countries in the region, and we aligned it more towards the West than the East.
And Rebecca, what is the current level of security cooperation between the U.S. and Saudi Arabia? How far does each nation want to take it?
Well, it's extensive, and don't forget, it's been 30 years, but we fought together during the 1991 Gulf War, and Saudi Arabia has a very, very capable military with security cooperation ties that are quite deep and quite formalized. And I think we want to see this go forward. And as Gerard pointed out, a lot of this, whether it's the AI agreements or the F-35s, is about making sure that Saudi Arabia stays with us and doesn't succumb to advances from China. This is a really important part of the global competition, and Saudi Arabia is a very, very key partner. So I'm glad to see these increasing ties and, of course, the Saudi investment back here in the U.S.
Significant moves for sure. Gerard Filitti, Rebecca Grant, thank you both so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
A Chinese espionage alert in Britain. Security services said Chinese agents are building relationships with lawmakers via LinkedIn, posing as normal companies, but acting on behalf of the Chinese regime. The UK announced protective measures, but critics call for more to be done. More on this from NTD's international correspondent, Malcolm Hudson.
Britain's security service MI5 issued an espionage alert on Tuesday, warning lawmakers that Chinese spies are targeting them by posing as headhunters or companies, highlighting two individuals reaching out via LinkedIn. Amanda Chiu, the chief executive of BRYR Executive Search, and Shirley Shen, co-founder of the Internship Union. MI5 said these two individuals conduct outreach at scale on behalf of the Chinese Ministry of State Security. British Security Minister Dan Jarvis said the government will not tolerate Chinese interference.
It is not just parliamentarians who should be concerned by this. Parliamentary staff, economists, think tank employees, geopolitical consultants and government officials have all been targeted for their networks and access to politicians.
He said China has a low threshold for what information it considers to be of value and will collect individual pieces of data to build a wider picture. Jarvis announced measures to tackle threats from China and other nations, including $223 million to improve encrypted technology used by civil servants to safeguard sensitive work, and security guidance for election candidates, along with plans to tighten rules on political donations.
I can also announce that this government has completed the removal of surveillance equipment manufactured by companies subject to the National Intelligence Law of the People's Republic of China from all sensitive sites we maintain in the UK and around the world.
He said China also poses threats to other sectors such as education and manufacturing. Opposition Home Office Minister Alicia Kearns urged the government to put China in the enhanced tier of the Foreign Influence Registration Scheme.
The minister today stated that the Chinese government is using proxy organisations to interfere in and commit espionage against our democracy. That is literally why we introduced the Foreign Influence Registration Scheme.
She said Tuesday's revelations come as no surprise and are just the latest in an ever-growing list of actions by the Chinese Communist Party to interfere with and undermine Britain's sovereignty. Jarvis said the government is looking to see whether it's necessary to add China to the enhanced tier, but has not yet made a decision. The warning comes after British prosecutors abandoned a case in September against 2 British men charged with spying on members of Parliament for China. Prosecutors said the British government had not provided clear evidence to show that Beijing was a threat to its national security. It also comes just weeks before the government must decide whether to approve a massive new Chinese embassy. Critics say it would pose a major security risk, as a Chinese spy base located a short distance from London's financial and governmental centres. Malcolm Hudson, NTD News, UK.
Coming up in college basketball, it's the ultimate doubleheader tonight between 4 blue blood programs, but one is without their big star. Dave Martin joins us to discuss when we return. And now for your sports news, we're joined by NTD's Dave Martin. Dave, plenty going on right now, but let's start in the NFL as the Pittsburgh Steelers have announced that quarterback Aaron Rodgers will not need surgery on his fractured wrist. What is his status for Sunday's game?
Yeah, his status is kind of like to be determined at this point. Now, Steelers head coach Mike Tomlin said how Rodgers is doing by Friday will be the key to whether he plays Sunday against the Bears. Now, fortunately, the fracture is on his left wrist, which is his non-throwing wrist. If it was his throwing wrist, of course, forget it. Now, Tomlin said, quote, "It's just about bracing and securing it for his comfort and safety, and then it's about how functional he is." Now, Rodgers was injured just before halftime in Sunday's win over the Bengals. He was hit on a 2nd and goal play where he kind of just threw the ball away. You couldn't see how the injury actually happened. He might have just landed on it wrong. He just get hit by a few people. Now, he stayed in for one more play before coming out. He did not play all, though, in the second half. Now, Tomlin said, though, that Rodgers actually wanted to return, so that's certainly a good sign for the Steelers. So, Tiff, the short answer is he's questionable.
All right.
I figured you went the long one, though.
Keep that in mind. Moving to college football news, though. Virginia Tech announced yesterday the hiring of former Penn State coach James Franklin. What did you make of the news?
Yeah, I thought it was a good hire for sure. I'm still surprised Penn State got rid of him after a 3-3 start. I mean, he won 70% of his games there overall. That equals job security at most places. Obviously, the Nittany Lions have looking for a little bit more, I guess. And before he went to Penn State, he was at Vanderbilt. They led them to back-to-back 9-win seasons. No one has ever done that. I mean, this is a non-football school and really a football-crazy conference, the SEC. But Virginia Tech, meanwhile, this is a very winnable place. Now, Frank Beamer, who retired from there in 2015, really turned them into a national power. They really haven't been since then, though. The conference they're in, meanwhile, the ACC, only has 3 teams ranked right now, and if the playoffs started this week, only 1 team would get in. That's really whoever wins the conference getting the automatic bid. Now that's compared to the Big Ten, for where he came from. The last 2 national champions came from that conference, so it was not an easy conference for sure.
I'm just surprised we're talking about hirings. Normally it's firings.
I know, right? I thought we'd have a positive vibe for today's show.
I like it. I like it. Shifting gears to the NBA, though, superstars LeBron James and Steph Curry pretty much ruled out being on the Olympic team in 2028. What were their reasons?
Well, age mainly. I mean, this was on a recent podcast. Now, James said flatly, I'll be watching it, referring to the 2028 games. Now, James will be 43 years old by that time. And although he's been about the best 40-year-old this league has ever seen, it's doubtful he'll still even be playing by that time. I mean, I would be expecting him to retire soon. I mean, most players his age do. But he was a major part of the Olympics team last summer that won gold, led the team in most every category except for points. Curry outscored him. Now, Curry would be 40 years old by the time of the 2028 games. Unlike LeBron, he didn't, completely rule out playing it, saying he highly doubts it. Now, believe it or not, the 2024 games were the only ones that Curry has been a part of, and he was needed. I mean, he scored 36 points in that incredible come-from-behind win over Serbia in the semifinals, where the U.S. was down 13 entering the fourth quarter. Curry hit 9 threes in that game. Really, it was an amazing performance. Now, Curry and LeBron played the most minutes for Team USA, so maybe in 2028 it'll be a younger roster. We'll see. Hopefully it's a talented one.
We shall see. Looking at college basketball news, though, we have a doubleheader tonight involving 4 blue blood programs at the Champions Classic.
Yes, Kentucky versus Michigan State, which just started a few minutes ago. I thought Kentucky was up 10-9. And then the later game, Duke versus Kansas. Now, both games are played right over here at Madison Square Garden in New York. All 4 teams, of course, are ranked in the top 25. Now, this is the 15th annual Champions Classic. Kansas has actually had the most success here, a 9-5 record thus far. They'll be hard-pressed to beat Duke tonight, though. The Jayhawks are without star freshman phenom Darren Peterson, who has a hamstring injury, and they really do not have much continual turnover, I should say, from last year's team. Not much turnover at all. Only one player who played for them last year is playing for them this year. Continuity, that's what I'm trying to say here. Continuity, that was the word I was looking for. The Blue Devils, meanwhile, they feature a highly praised freshman, Cameron Boozer. He's the son of former NBA star Carlos Boozer. Duke is 10.5-point favorites, so I don't really have very high hopes for KU tonight. I'm just trying to prepare myself for what looks like the inevitable double-digit loss.
Well, you never know.
You never know. You never know.
We can also sprinkle some SAT words in now.
Yes, I'm sure I looked very smart there.
That was a good recovery, though. Dave, as always, thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you, Tiff.
And that's all for today's news. For round-the-clock coverage, visit us at ntd.com/live or download our NTD app. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Good night.